The release of the Loki series served to overhaul what we knew about the multiverse, and then set the stage for the remainder of Phase 4 and beyond. As the science of time travel and more multiversal adventures begin to transpire, they will be able to trace their origins back to the Loki series and the profound impact it had on the MCU. One of the most pressing questions, however, has to do with the closing moments of the series, wherein we find Loki exploring a foreign version of the organization, the TVA. He meets Mobius, who does not recognize him, and finds that the TVA is now under the leadership of none other than Kang the Conqueror. But is it possible that there's more to this than we previously believed? The general idea seems to be that this is an alternate version of the Time Variance Authority, but we have reason to believe that this isn't necessarily the case. So, stick with us today, watchers of the Marvel Multiverse, and let's explore what this might reveal about the TVA's hidden past, and uncover what was previously known about this shady organization. The theory proposes that Loki hasn't actually found himself in a different version of the TVA at all. It suggests that this is the same version of Mobius that Loki knows, and it's actually still in the same version that he grew to know over the course of the series. As of now, we know that the Citadel at the end of time exists outside of the current time stream that we know, and it's presumed that the TVA does as well. This is why Infinity Stones and magic have no effect, as well as why the TVA is able to make an outside look at the sacred timeline from afar. Whether or not it's within the quantum realm between universes or elsewhere, the main point is that the TVA experiences time much differently, and time can't be measured the same way when inside the TVA. The Time Variance Authority, however, still had to have had a timeline of its own, even if it isn't in line with the rest of the universe. It had a foundation by He Who Remains, a growth period where it expanded and learned, and a rise to maturity under He Who Remains, who worked out the kinks of how to get the TVA functioning. He needed to do testing and experience trial and error before he could hone in on a specific operating practice of the organization, and this could only be done if the TVA itself also has a past, a present, and a future. It didn't simply materialize fully formed out of nowhere, but it was slowly built over time. If this is the case, then it's very likely, then one might even argue that it's almost certain that He Who Remains, which took a much more hands-on role in founding the TVA, building it from the ground up and figuring out how everything was going to work. He would have personally pruned the first individuals that he recruited and showed them how to run the organization, and he would have needed to build the faces of the timekeepers in order to keep everyone in line, and someone would have known him before he went into hiding. So, given this, is it possible that Loki is in the TVA's past before Mobius ever met Loki, and Mobius therefore does not have any memories of the series because it hasn't happened yet? If this is the case, then it would mean that the statue Loki sees before him is actually that of He Who Remains and not Kang, but He Who Remains at the height of his power, and as this ruler grows older, he will begin to reset his workforce to erase their memories of him. So then, with this theory in mind, let's track what we know about the first multiversal war to see if this makes any sense. We know that in the waning days of the conflict, He Who Remains weaponized Goliath the Usurper to consume the multiverse, and he was able to purge the neighboring timelines, but he never explicitly states that the TVA was only created after the sacred timeline was already established. And this seems to make perfect sense. If He Who Remains destroyed the multiverse without a backup plan, then splinters in the time stream would have eventually become too much for him to handle. The TVA at the height of its power when we see it in Loki is constantly at work hunting variants and pruning branches. So if it was just He Who Remains, then there is no feasible way that he could have simultaneously maintained order and built the TVA from the ground up. The multiverse would have grown out of control and spread again if this was just him maintaining the timeline in addition to building the TVA. This seems to indicate that he was already in the process of building the TVA when the war was at its height, potentially even using the Minutemen as his own personal army. This way, when the multiverse was destroyed, the TVA was already at the ready, being primed to protect the sacred timeline, and all He Who Remains had to do was reset the memories of himself and then place the timekeepers in control. From here, he could have taken a hands-off approach, watching as the Minutemen and the judges carried out their training just as he had conditioned them to do, while at the same time escaping to the Citadel where he'd live out the remainder of his retirement. If this is the case, then we might see Loki exploring the early days of the TVA when the multiversal war was still being waged, and this makes more sense now that the sacred timeline has split. The multiversal war is now officially underway again, which means that He Who Remains is once again a soldier on the front lines, and is once again using the TVA as his own personal army. This would mean that the rebirth of the multiverse not only reset the time stream, but it also reset the TVA back to its infancy when it was a private army for He Who Remains, who is now much younger, and it would also mean that He Who Remains' younger counterpart will likely be a major player throughout Loki Season 2. This could mean that Loki will spend Season 2 fighting the very same variant that Sylvie killed, and we can see He Who Remains' rise to power in real time, seeing what he did to amass this much power across the multiverse, complete his quest to find and weaponize Goliath, and his attempt to restore harmony. Since Loki knows what He Who Remains did, and understands how the multiverse is going to meet its end, then he will be able to warn the Avengers about the impending calamity in hopes that Goliath will not be ever used again. And as some of our previous theories have explained, we believe that He Who Remains may actually be the main antagonist in the Kang dynasty, and could in fact be this prime Kang that the Avengers need to take down. But anyway, my friends, what are your thoughts on this theory? Do you think that the TVA in Loki is actually a younger TVA than what we see in the beginning of the series? And do you think that the Kang statue is actually a statue of He Who Remains? And do you think that Loki Season 2 could actually cover the multiversal war and how He Who Remains won the war? As always, my friends, thank you guys so much for watching and continuing to support the channel. Hit that subscribe button to assemble and join our team, and I hope that you have a great day.